I didn't realize my life was ending until she smiled at someone else while standing next to me. The music was soft, people were laughing, glasses clinking like everything was perfect, but my chest felt tight. I leaned closer. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes were locked on Ryan across the room. Something felt off. Then she stepped forward with a glass. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" she called out. The room quieted. I frowned. "Olivia, what are you doing?" She ignored me. "I've been thinking about my future," she said calmly. People smiled, expecting something sweet. She paused, then looked straight at Ryan. "And I realized I don't want a life where I have to struggle." My heartbeat slowed, strangely calm. "Olivia," I said under my breath. She finally looked at me, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "Jason, let's not pretend anymore." A few people shifted. Daniel stepped behind me. "This doesn't sound right," he whispered. I didn't move. "Pretend what?" I asked. She tilted her head. "That you were enough." The words didn't hit like a slap. They sank in slowly. Someone gasped. Lisa gave a small laugh. Ryan stood there like this was entertainment. "You're doing this here?" I asked quietly. She sighed. "You're a good person, Jason, but that's not enough anymore. I want more. I deserve more." I nodded once. "And he gives you that?" I asked, glancing at Ryan. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Daniel grabbed my arm. "Let's leave," he said. I gently pulled away. "No," my voice came out calm. That surprised everyone. Even her. "Say something," she said, almost impatient. "Aren't you going to fight for this?" I looked at her. "When did you decide I wasn't worth it?" She looked away for a second, then shrugged. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." She exhaled. "Fine. When I realized you were never going to become anything big." Silence filled the room. Ryan stepped forward with a faint smile. "Don't take it personally," he said. "People grow." I met his eyes. "You think this is growth?" He shrugged. "It's reality." I let out a small breath. "Take care of her," I said simply. "That's it." Olivia asked, "What did you expect?" I replied, "I expected you to care." I held her gaze. I did. For a moment, her expression shifted, like she didn't expect that answer. Then she shook it off. "Then act like it." I shook my head. "No. I'm done acting." Daniel stepped beside me again. "Jason, we're leaving." I nodded. I looked at her one last time. "You didn't just end this tonight," I said quietly. "You changed something you won't be able to fix." Her eyes flickered, but she forced a smile. "I'll be fine." I stepped back. "I know you think that." I turned and walked away. No shouting. No scene. Just silence. Outside, the cold air hit my face. Daniel looked at me. "How are you this calm?" he asked. I stared ahead. "Because if I break now, I'll stay broken." He stayed quiet. I clenched my jaw, not in anger but in decision. "She thinks I'm nothing," I said. "You're not," he replied. I nodded slightly. "I know." For the first time that night, I felt something real again. Not pain. Not love. Purpose. I looked back at the building one last time. "I'm not going to prove her wrong with words," I said calmly. Daniel watched me. "Then how?" I faced forward. "With everything that comes next." The first thing Daniel said when we got into the car was, "Say something, Jason." I stared out the window. The city lights blurred past, but my mind was stuck in that room. Her voice. Her smile. The way she looked at Ryan. I exhaled slowly. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. Daniel hit the steering wheel lightly. "That this is insane. That you're angry. That you're going back in there and fixing this." I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix." He glanced at me. "She humiliated you in front of everyone." I nodded once. "I know." "Then why are you acting like it didn't happen?" I turned toward him. "Because reacting won't change what already happened." He frowned. "So you're just going to let it go?" I leaned back in the seat. "No. I'm just not going to react the way she expects." He stayed quiet for a second. "And what does that even mean?" I looked ahead. "It means I'm not giving her the satisfaction." Daniel scoffed. "Satisfaction? Jason, she replaced you in front of a crowd." I kept my voice steady. "Exactly. And if I go back there angry, shouting, begging, I prove her right." He shook his head. "No, you prove you care." I met his eyes. Caring and losing control are two different things. The car slowed at a red light. Daniel looked at me again. "You're too calm," he said. "This isn't normal." I gave a small, tired smile. Nothing about tonight was normal. He leaned back. So what now? You just disappear? I thought for a moment. No. I stay exactly where I am. Doing what? He asked. Watching, I replied. He raised an eyebrow. Watching. I nodded. People show their true selves when they think you've already lost. Daniel crossed his arms. And Olivia? I looked out the window again. She thinks I lost the moment she walked away. He hesitated. Did you? I shook my head slowly. No. I just stopped playing the game her way. We reached my place, but neither of us got out right away. Daniel turned off the engine. I don't like this, he admitted. I don't like that you're holding everything in. I looked at my hands. I'm not holding it in. I'm controlling it. He sighed. There's a difference? I nodded. Yeah. Holding it in makes it explode later. Controlling it turns it into something useful. He stared at me. Useful for what? I finally looked at him. For what comes next? He didn't reply. I opened the door. Get some rest, he said as I stepped out. I nodded. You too. Inside, the silence hit harder than anything else. No music. No voices. Just me and my thoughts. I loosened my tie and dropped it on the table. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I stared at it for a second before opening it. It was Olivia. We need to talk. I read it twice. Then I locked the screen and placed the phone down. I sat on the couch, leaning forward, elbows on my knees. No, I muttered to myself. We don't. The next morning, Daniel called again. Did she text you? He asked immediately. Yeah. And? I didn't reply. There was a pause. You're serious about this silence thing? I stood by the window looking at the street below. It's not just silence, I said. It's control. He let out a breath. She's going to think you don't care. I shrugged slightly. She already thinks that. And you're okay with it? He asked. I answered without hesitation. Yes. Later that day, I walked into a small cafe we used to visit. Not for memories, just because I felt like it. The barista recognized me. Hey, where's Olivia? She asked casually. I gave a small smile. Busy. She nodded and handed me my coffee. I took a seat by the window. A couple nearby was laughing softly. I watched them for a moment, then looked away. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Jason, stop ignoring me. I didn't open it this time. I just turned the phone face down. By the evening, Daniel showed up at my place. I had to see you, he said as he walked in. You're acting like nothing happened. I handed him a drink. Something did happen. He took the glass. Then why don't you show it? I leaned against the counter. Because showing it gives it power. He frowned. That sounds like something you've been thinking about all day. I nodded. I have. He studied me carefully. You've changed. I shook my head slightly. No. I just stopped reacting. He sat down. You really think this is the right move? I walked over and sat across from him. I think it's the only move. He sighed. I would have gone back. I would have confronted her. I smiled faintly. That's what she expected. He looked up. And you didn't give her that. I shook my head. No, he leaned back. So what are you giving her? I looked at him for a long second. Then I answered quietly. Nothing. I walked into Victor Langford's office without hesitation, but I could feel the weight of the moment settling in my chest. The glass walls, the quiet luxury, the controlled silence, it all felt familiar, like something I had stepped away from a long time ago. Victor looked up from his desk, studying me with sharp eyes. I was wondering how long it would take, he said calmly. I pulled the chair back and sat across from him. I needed a reason, I replied. He leaned back slightly. And now you have one. I met his gaze. Now I have clarity. He nodded once, like he already understood everything I wasn't saying. You've always had potential, Jason. You just chose to stay in the background. I exhaled slowly. That wasn't a mistake. He raised an eyebrow. No. I shook my head. It was preparation. Victor tapped his fingers lightly on the table. Most people don't prepare for years without a goal. I gave a faint smile. I had a goal. I just didn't have a trigger. He leaned forward slightly. And she became that trigger? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked at the city through the glass behind him. She didn't create anything new, I said finally. She just forced me to stop holding back. Victor watched me closely. So what exactly have you been holding back? I reached into my pocket and placed a small file on his desk. He opened it, scanning the contents. His expression shifted just slightly. "You've been working on this quietly?" I nodded. "For a long time." He looked up again. "And no one knows?" "No one needed to know," I replied. He closed the file slowly. "You understand what this means, right?" I leaned back in my chair. "It means I stop being invisible." He gave a small, approving smile. "It also means people will start paying attention." I held his gaze. "Let them." He studied me for a moment longer, then said, "You've changed." I shook my head. "No. I just stopped pretending to be less." That seemed to interest him. "And what's your next move?" I rested my hands on the table. "I don't rush. I don't react. I move when it matters." He nodded. "Strategic." I gave a quiet response. "Controlled." He smiled faintly. "That's dangerous." I met his expression without hesitation. Only for the people who thought I was nothing. Later I stepped out of the building, the air feeling different than it had before. Not lighter, not heavier, just clearer. My phone buzzed again. "Olivia." I looked at the screen for a second, then locked it without opening the message. "Still trying," I muttered under my breath. Daniel called right after. "Where are you?" he asked. "Out," I replied. "Doing what?" I paused briefly. "Moving forward." He let out a small laugh. "You sound different." I leaned against the railing, looking down at the street below. "I am different." "Did you finally decide to do something?" he asked. I answered simply. "I already started." There was a pause on the line. "Started what?" Daniel pressed. I didn't give details. "Something I should have done a long time ago." He sighed. "You're not going to explain, are you?" I smiled slightly. "Not yet." He sounded half annoyed, half impressed. "You've got this whole mystery thing going on now." I straightened up. "It's not mystery. It's timing." "And when will the timing be right?" he asked. I looked out at the city again, my reflection faint in the glass beside me. "Soon," I said. Then I added quietly, more to myself than to him, "Very soon." I didn't see Olivia for days after that night, but I kept hearing about her. Not directly from her. She still sent messages I didn't open, but from the noise around me. People talk more when they think you're not listening. That morning, Daniel walked into my place without knocking. "You've been quiet," he said, dropping onto the chair. I handed him a drink. "That's the plan." He shook his head. "Well, her life isn't quiet." I leaned against the counter. "What does that mean?" He looked at me carefully. "Luxury events, expensive dinners, new circles. Ryan's making sure everyone sees it." I nodded slightly. "Good for them." Daniel frowned. "That's it." I met his eyes. "What else should I say?" He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "There's more." I didn't react. "She's asking about you." That caught my attention just slightly. "Asking what?" I asked calmly. "Who you're meeting. Where you've been. Why your name came up in a conversation with Victor Langford." I let out a quiet breath. "And?" Daniel leaned forward. "And she didn't look confident when she asked. She looked confused." I gave a faint smile. "That's new." He watched me closely. "You knew this would happen." I shrugged lightly. "People get uncomfortable when their assumptions break." He nodded slowly. "Ryan didn't like it either." My expression stayed neutral. "Of course not." Later that evening I got another call. This time I answered. Not because I wanted to hear her voice, but because I wanted to hear her hesitation. "Jason?" she said, her tone softer than I remembered. "You finally picked up." I stayed silent for a second. "What do you want?" I asked. She paused. "I just heard something today." I didn't help her. "About you," she added. I leaned back slightly. "People hear a lot of things." She exhaled. "They said you've been meeting important people." I gave a short reply. "Maybe." That seemed to throw her off. "Maybe?" she repeated. "That's all you're going to say?" I kept my voice steady. "You didn't call to hear explanations." She went quiet. "I just want to understand," she said after a moment. "Understand what?" "You," she replied. I almost smiled. "You already decided who I was," I said calmly. "Why question it now?" She hesitated again. "Because things don't make sense anymore." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch. She filled it. "Ryan said it's nothing. That you're probably just trying to look important." I nodded slightly, even though she couldn't see me. "And you believed him?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. That told me everything. "I don't know what to believe," she admitted. I stood up and walked toward the window. The city lights looked the same, but everything felt different. Then don't believe anything, I said. Just watch. She sounded frustrated now. Why are you talking like this? I let out a quiet breath. Because I'm not the person you think I am anymore. She went silent again. I could hear it in the way she breathed. Uneven. Uncertain. Jason, she started but didn't finish. I didn't help her this time either. After a few seconds she spoke again. Ryan's been acting strange lately. That interested me more than anything else she had said. Strange how? I asked. He's different, she said slowly. More controlling. More defensive. Like he's trying to prove something all the time. I didn't react. That sounds exhausting, I replied calmly. She let out a small laugh, but it wasn't real. It is. There was a pause. Then she asked quietly, did I make a mistake? I closed my eyes for a second, not because I felt anything, but because I wanted to choose my words carefully. That's not my question to answer, I said. It's yours. She didn't reply. The silence between us felt heavier than before. I have to go, I said finally. Wait, she said quickly. Jason, are you really okay? I looked out at the city again. For the first time the answer came easily. Yes, I said. Then I ended the call. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand. Not thinking about her. Not thinking about the past. Just observing how things were shifting. Daniel texted me a few minutes later. You talked to her, didn't you? I replied with a single word. Yes. He responded instantly. And? I looked at the screen, then typed slowly. It's starting. I didn't announce anything and I didn't try to prove anything. I just started showing up where I was supposed to be. The first time I walked into that private meeting, Adrian Hayes looked at me like he was trying to remember where he had seen me before. You're Jason, right? He asked. I nodded. I've heard your name recently, he added. I pulled out my chair and sat down. That usually means something is moving, I replied calmly. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small smile. People don't usually move this quietly. I met his eyes. That's why they don't see it coming. The meeting went on, but I noticed the shift almost immediately. No one interrupted me. No one dismissed my input. Adrian leaned forward halfway through and said, You've been working on this longer than you're letting on. I didn't deny it. I don't rush timing, I said. He nodded slowly. That explains a lot. Another man at the table added, We underestimated you. I kept my tone even. That wasn't my mistake. There was a brief silence, then Adrian spoke again. I like how you think. Calm. Strategic. No noise. I gave a slight nod. Noise makes people predictable. He leaned back, clearly interested now. We should talk more after this. I didn't react, but inside I knew exactly what that meant. Later that evening, Daniel met me outside the building. He looked at me for a second, then shook his head with a half smile. I don't recognize you anymore. I adjusted my jacket slightly. You never saw this side. He laughed quietly. That's the scary part. We started walking. Adrian Hayes, he said, almost impressed. That's not a small circle. I glanced at him. It never was. He stopped for a moment. Jason, what exactly have you been doing all this time? I paused, then answered simply. Preparing. He let out a breath. And now? I looked ahead. Now I execute. He didn't question it further. He didn't need to. By the next week, my name started appearing in places it hadn't before. Not loudly, not publicly, but enough for the right people to notice. Daniel sent me a message one afternoon. You're trending in conversations you shouldn't be in yet. I replied, yet. A few minutes later he called. Olivia asked about you again. I stayed quiet for a second. What did she say? I asked. She heard your name at a dinner. Not in a bad way, he added. In a different way. I leaned back in my chair. Different how? He hesitated. Respect. I let that sit for a moment. She didn't sound like she believed it, Daniel continued. She sounded like she was trying to understand it. I gave a short response. That's not my job anymore. He chuckled softly. Ryan didn't like it either. That caught my attention. What happened? I asked. He tried to brush it off at first, Daniel said. But when someone mentioned Victor Langford and your name in the same sentence, he got quiet. I stood up and walked toward the window. That's interesting. Daniel laughed lightly. Yeah, well, the confidence isn't as strong as it used to be. I looked out at the city again, the same view I had seen before, but everything felt sharper now. This was always going to happen, I said. People just didn't expect the timing. Daniel stayed quiet, then asked, "Are you enjoying this?" I thought about it for a second. "I'm not enjoying it," I said honestly. "I'm just aligned." He didn't respond immediately. "That sounds like you've already won," he finally said. I shook my head slightly. Winning isn't loud. It's controlled. That night, I received another message. This time I opened it. "Olivia. I heard your name again today." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "You will." A few seconds passed before she replied. "Why does it feel like I never really knew you?" I read it twice, then answered calmly. "Because you only saw what you wanted to see." There was a pause before her next message. "And now?" I leaned back slightly. "Now you're seeing what you missed." I didn't wait for her response this time. I placed the phone down and let the silence settle around me. For the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly where it was supposed to be. I didn't have to look for updates about Olivia anymore. They reached me on their own. That morning, Daniel called before I even finished my coffee. "It's happening faster than I thought," he said without greeting. I leaned against the counter. "What is?" I asked. "Ryan's situation," he replied. "Deals falling through, investors pulling back, pressure building." I stayed quiet for a moment. "And Olivia?" I asked. He exhaled. "She's still there, but it doesn't look the same anymore." I nodded slightly. "It never does when reality shows up." Daniel hesitated. "She asked about you again." I didn't react. "What did she say this time?" I asked calmly. "She didn't ask directly," he said. "She just listened when your name came up, like she was trying to connect pieces." I walked toward the window, watching the city move like nothing had changed. "That's how it starts," I said. "What is?" Daniel asked. "Doubt," I replied. He went quiet. "Ryan's not handling it well," he added after a second. "He's been snapping at people, making rushed decisions." I gave a short response. "Pressure reveals everything." Daniel let out a small breath. "You sound like you expected this." I didn't deny it. "I understand patterns," I said. "And he's following one." There was a pause. "And Olivia?" he asked again. I looked at my reflection in the glass. She chose that pattern. Later that day, my phone rang again. I already knew who it was before I picked up. "Jason?" Her voice was different this time. Not confident. Not steady. I didn't speak first. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I let a second pass. "We're already talking," I replied. She hesitated. "Not like this." I leaned back slightly. "Then say what you need to say." She took a breath. "Things aren't how I thought they would be." I kept my tone neutral. "They rarely are." She sounded frustrated. "Why are you always so calm?" I gave a simple answer. "Because I don't expect illusions to last." She went silent for a moment. Then she said, "Ryan's under a lot of pressure right now." I didn't respond immediately. "And that affects you," I said after a second. "Of course it does," she replied. "I'm part of this." I nodded slightly. "You chose to be." That stung. I could hear it in her breathing. "You don't have to say it like that," she said quietly. "Like what?" I asked. "Like everything is my fault." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm not saying that. I'm just not pretending it's something else." Another pause. "He's changed," she admitted. "He's not the same person I thought he was." I walked slowly across the room. "People don't change that fast," I said. "You just see them clearly when things get hard." She didn't argue. That told me more than her words. "He gets angry over small things," she continued. "He questions everything, even me." I leaned against the wall. "That sounds exhausting." She let out a weak laugh. "It is." Then her voice dropped. "Jason, I didn't have this with you." I didn't answer right away. She filled the silence. "You were stable. You didn't make me feel like I had to prove anything all the time." I closed my eyes for a brief second, not because I felt anything, but because I recognized the shift. "You didn't value that before," I said calmly. "I didn't understand it," she corrected softly. I opened my eyes again. "There's a difference," I replied. She stayed quiet, and for the first time I could feel her hesitation clearly. "I thought I was choosing something better," she said. "You chose something louder," I said. "Not better." She didn't argue. "And now," I added. She exhaled slowly. "Now I feel like I lost something I didn't even realize I had." I didn't respond immediately. I let that settle. Then I said, "That realization doesn't change anything." Her voice broke slightly. It changes how I feel. I looked out the window again, the city still moving like it didn't care about any of this. Feelings don't fix decisions, I said. They just come after them. She went quiet again. I could almost picture her standing there, unsure, uncertain, nothing like the person I had seen that night. Jason, she said softer now. Do you ever think about us? I answered honestly. No. The silence that followed was heavier than anything she had said before. I see, she whispered. I didn't soften my tone. You asked. Another pause. Then she said, I think I made a mistake. I didn't rush to respond. That's something you'll have to live with, I said finally. She didn't reply. I could hear her breathing again, uneven, unsure. I have to go, I added. This time she didn't stop me. When the call ended, I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand. Not thinking about her. Not thinking about the past. Just observing how everything was unfolding exactly as it was supposed to. Daniel texted a minute later. She called you, didn't she? I typed back slowly. Yes. He replied instantly. And? I looked at the screen, then sent one line. It's already too late. I knew she would come back. Not because I expected it, but because patterns don't change, they just take time to reveal themselves. That afternoon, I was leaving the building when I saw her standing near the entrance. Olivia. She looked different. Not in appearance, she was still dressed well, still carried herself with that same presence. But something underneath was missing. Confidence. Certainty. She stepped forward the moment she saw me. Jason? Her voice wasn't steady. I stopped, but I didn't move closer. You've been avoiding me, she said. I looked at her calmly. No. I've been living my life. She swallowed slightly. Can we talk? I considered it for a second, then nodded. You already started. She let out a quiet breath, like she had been holding it in for too long. I messed up, she said immediately. No hesitation this time. No pride. Just raw honesty. I didn't respond. I just watched her. I thought I knew what I wanted, she continued, her voice shaking slightly. I thought I was choosing something better. I tilted my head slightly. And now? I asked. She looked down for a second before meeting my eyes again. Now I realize I lost something real. I stayed silent. That silence seemed to affect her more than anything I could have said. Say something, she whispered. I shook my head slightly. You're not here for my words. You're here because of your realization. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't look away this time. I'm here because I miss you, she said. Because I see everything clearly now. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. Ryan isn't who I thought he was, she added quickly. He's unstable, he's angry, and everything feels like it's falling apart. I crossed my arms loosely. And that brought you here? I asked. She stepped closer. No, losing you did. I held her gaze, but there was nothing behind mine for her to hold on to. Jason, I didn't understand what I had, she said. But I do now. I gave a quiet response. Understanding after losing something doesn't bring it back. She shook her head quickly. It can if you let it, she insisted. We can fix this. I almost smiled, but there was no warmth in it. There's nothing to fix, I said. You made a decision. Her voice broke. I made a mistake. I corrected her calmly. You made a choice. That hit harder than anything else. She took a step back like the truth itself had weight. Please, she said softly. Don't do this. I looked at her, steady and unmoved. I'm not doing anything, I replied. I'm just not undoing what you already did. She wiped her tears quickly, trying to hold herself together. I can be better, she said. I can change. I didn't react. You don't need to change for me, I said. You needed to value what you had when it was yours. She shook her head again. I didn't see it, she whispered. I see it now. I stepped slightly to the side, creating distance without making it obvious. That's your lesson, I said. Not my responsibility. Her breathing became uneven. So that's it, she asked. You're just going to walk away like I did? I answered without hesitation. No. I already walked away. This is just you catching up. She went quiet. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the one question I knew was coming. Do you feel anything for me anymore? I looked at her, really looked at her, not as someone I loved, not as someone I lost, but as someone who made a choice and now had to live with it. No, I said. That word ended everything. Her expression collapsed completely. No strength left. No confidence. Just regret. I don't believe that, she whispered. I didn't argue. You don't have to, I said. It doesn't change anything. She stepped closer again, almost desperate now. Jason, please, don't let this be the end. I held my ground. It ended the moment you decided I wasn't enough. She shook her head, tears falling freely now. I was wrong, she said. I know that now. I didn't move. I didn't soften. I didn't give her anything. Knowing it now doesn't change when you should have known it, I replied calmly. She stood there, breaking in front of me, and for the first time, I understood something clearly. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't anger. This was distance. And distance was final. I have to go, I said. This time she didn't stop me. She just stood there watching. The same way I had once stood and watched her walk away. Only now, she understood exactly what that felt like. I stood on the rooftop, the city stretching endlessly in front of me, but for once I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. Daniel leaned against the railing beside me. You've been quiet again, he said, watching me carefully. I gave a small smile. Not quiet. Just clear. He nodded slowly. That's new. I looked out at the skyline. No. It's just something I didn't have before. He crossed his arms. And now you do? I answered without hesitation. Control. He let out a soft laugh. You always had that. You just didn't use it. I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. A few seconds passed before he spoke again. Do you ever think about going back? He asked. I turned slightly toward him. Back to what? I replied. He shrugged. Before everything changed. I shook my head. There's no before anymore. He studied my face like he was trying to find something I wasn't showing. Not even for closure? He pressed. I looked at him calmly. Closure isn't something you get from other people. It's something you decide. He stayed quiet after that. Then he smiled faintly. You really did change. I exhaled slowly. No. I just stopped being who I was for someone else. Later that evening, I met Sophia for dinner. She looked at me with a soft curiosity. Daniel says you're a completely different person now, she said lightly. I sat down across from her. That depends on what version he's comparing me to, I replied. She smiled. The one who used to stay quiet for the wrong reasons. I tilted my head slightly. And now? I asked. She met my eyes. Now you stay quiet because you don't need to prove anything. I didn't respond immediately. Then I said, that sounds more accurate. She leaned back slightly. So what happens next? I looked at the table for a second, then back at her. I moved forward. She nodded. Without looking back? I gave a simple answer. Without needing to. My phone buzzed once during dinner. I didn't check it. Sophia noticed. You're not even curious? She asked. I shook my head. Not anymore. She smiled faintly. That's a kind of freedom most people don't understand. I leaned back slightly. It's not freedom. It's clarity. She raised an eyebrow. What's the difference? I thought about it for a second. Freedom is when nothing holds you back, I said. Clarity is when nothing pulls you back. She held my gaze, then nodded slowly. I like that. I gave a small smile. So do I. When I got home, I finally checked my phone. One message. Olivia. I stared at it for a moment before opening it. I understand now, it read. Nothing else. No questions. No requests. Just that. I looked at the screen, then locked it again. No reply. No hesitation. Just silence. Not the kind of silence that hides something, but the kind that ends it. The next morning, Daniel called again. Big meeting today? He asked. I walked toward the window, watching the city wake up. Yeah. He laughed softly. You don't sound nervous. I replied calmly. I'm not. He paused. You've come a long way. I nodded slightly. I know. He hesitated, then asked, so this is it? This is what you wanted? I thought about it for a second. Not exactly, I said. But it's what I needed. He didn't ask anything else after that. Before leaving, I stood there for a moment, looking at my reflection. Not to admire it. Not to question it. Just to recognize it. The person staring back at me wasn't the same one who stood in that room, waiting for someone else to decide his worth. That version of me was gone. Not broken. Not lost. Just replaced. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. I just needed to live. I stepped outside, the air feeling lighter than it had in a long time. As I walked forward, I realized something simple but powerful. I didn't win because she lost. I won because I stopped losing myself. And that was enough.